2 years ago, on February 24th, 2022, the lives of millions of Ukrainians changed forever. Russia had just launched a full-scale invasion. An open conflict that would also upend the lives of hundreds of thousands of Russians opposed to the war.
I had 3 options: go to prison, commit suicide, or leave.
We left with our 3 kids, 3 suitcases, and that was it.
They left for Armenia, Georgia, Turkey. Some requested asylum in France.
There are nights that feel endless. You lie in bed frozen with anxiety.
The start of a long road, far from the country they were born in, that had left them no choice but to leave. This man wishes to remain anonymous, so we'll call him Alexei. He's a Russian deserter. He fled his country in September 2022. Vladimir Putin had just signed a partial mobilization order with the goal of finding 300,000 men to send to Ukraine.
I knew what I was going to do. I was going to desert, whatever the price. I didn't want to leave, but I had to. I had to because it was impossible for me to join the Russian army, to massacre the Ukrainian people, and to devastate Ukrainian land.
Alexei was born in Moscow 37 years ago. His father is Russian, his mother Ukrainian. Single and without children, he spent several days holed up in his home before making his decision.
I woke up on September 25th, and I decided to leave. To leave and maybe never come back. I packed my bags. I bought plane tickets. I made hotel reservations. And that evening, my sister dropped me off at the station. I kissed her and my mother goodbye. And I took the train, not knowing where I was going and for how long.
Alexei went to St. Petersburg and then took the train to Finland. He had a valid tourist visa for the Schengen zone and had worked for a French organization in Russia for 12 years. So he decided to go to Paris to seek asylum.
The first challenge was finding a job. It's really complicated. First, because of the lack of papers, and also psychologically, because it means you're starting a new life. You wonder to what extent you're abandoning your old life to start a new one. But I can't just put aside this war and pretend that it doesn't still impact me. Because most of my family lives in Ukraine. My cousin is currently on the front lines. And recently, my Ukrainian uncle sacrificed his life in this fight.
Ernest fled Russia on March 7th, 2022, months before the mobilization order. This jurist and human rights defender is a longtime opponent of Vladimir Putin. And at the start of the war, the Russian president launched a ruthless crackdown on his critics. Russians can be sentenced to 15 years in prison for spreading alleged lies about the conflict. And Ernest had publicly opposed the war on social media.
I had 3 options: go to prison, commit suicide, or leave. I decided that the first 2 options were not very responsible considering my family and the values I fight for. I figured that by choosing political immigration, a specialist like me could find work to do in the domain of human rights. Sadly, there are also violations in France, so I decided to leave.
Today is a big day for Ernest. Almost 2 years after his arrival in France, he's coming to pick up his 10-year residence permit at the prefecture in Angers, in the west of France. A small card that will make his life a whole lot easier.
Thank you, France. I'm very happy. It's a relief. It means I can look for a better job, because employers, of course, prefer this card over a piece of paper valid for just 3 months. And it will allow me to get a travel permit and go to Turkey, for example, where my mother could meet me.
Because Ernest had to leave his family behind. His mother, but also his wife, his 23-year-old son who's studying in Moscow, and his 18-year-old daughter with intellectual disabilities. As he waits for his wife and daughter to join him in Angers, he's been navigating through various administrative issues thanks to a specialized educator and an automatic translator.
You need to anticipate requesting healthcare for your wife and your daughter. Ernest is very different from the other asylum seekers and refugees. He can handle most of his administrative procedures alone. He's very, very autonomous. I rarely worked with someone like him, and it's great.
I started fighting for democracy in Russia when I was 17. So I have a lot of experience working with administrators and in conditions that were, of course, much worse than in France.
Nastia Radionova is also one of the 2,600 Russians who sought asylum in France in the first year of the invasion. A political journalist turned writer, she had to start over when she arrived in Paris in April 2022. Not knowing how to speak French, art has been a way for her to express herself.
It's the first time I've worked with plaster strips. I like it.
Nastia often collaborates on artistic projects with her husband, Dmitri Korliansky, a contemporary music composer. In April 2022, just after the start of the war, the couple was invited to France by a theater company to put on an opera they'd written and composed together.
We left with our 3 children, 3 suitcases, and that's it. And we stayed here without knowing if we were going to stay in Paris, because it wasn't clear. It wasn't planned in advance.
From the outside, leaving Russia might seem like a difficult decision, but it was very obvious. When the war started, I had no doubt that we had to leave and take our children with us. Because the alternative was to go to prison. Because I'd taken part in anti-war political actions and I couldn't and wouldn't be silent.
Refusing to be silenced and moving forward without looking back.
The opera we brought to France was Eurydice. It was basically about the same situation. You can't look back. You need to escape hell. So it's connected.
It's a twist of fate, because my father was a dissident during the time of the USSR. He was imprisoned. Now he's 78, and his daughter has left Russia because of her own anti-Russian activities. Now I've become an enemy of the people. What's important is that my children will know I didn't remain silent, and they'll grow up with that. They'll know that they can't be silent. I'm happy they're growing up in France. My eldest son recently went to a little protest, and I'm happy that he has that opportunity here.
Alexei has also been going to protests as an amateur photographer.
I was always fascinated by protests in France. That's not Russian at all. Because if it were in Russia, that guy would have been shot down on sight.
Alexei has no regrets about leaving Russia. But if he wants to keep his status as a refugee in France, he'll have to give up going home, even briefly, to visit his mom or his sister.
I'm angry at Putin on a personal level, because he stole my life. He didn't steal it physically, but you could say he took everything from me except my life, and my right to express myself in other countries, places where it's allowed, in normal countries.
Ernest is learning French and helping other exiles defend their rights, whether they be Russians like him or Ukrainians like Olga. Born with disabilities, she had to flee her home in eastern Ukraine, another life upended by the war.